All right, does it say recording for everyone?
Yes.
Great. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Procreate Basics meeting. As you can kind of see by my camera, my face isn't showing in this meeting so that you guys can see my hands and the gesture controls that I do, and also the weird way I hold a pencil. But I'm going to be going from like ultra basic stuff I wish I knew the first day that I had Procreate to some of the like way more hidden features. I also cannot see my monitor right now, so I have Sarah co-hosting with me to be able to like read me messages and let people into the waiting room, stuff like that. So if it takes an extra moment for your question to be read out from the chat, please know that that is why. You can also unmute and ask a question at any point in the presentation, though I do ask that you do stay muted during it. And also, hello if you're watching this recorded from YouTube. Okay, so getting started. Here's kind of like my home screen. I'm going to make sure that this is centered. During the meetings like this, you guys get to see my Twitch streaming setup when I Twitch stream my art. But here we go. So this is Procreate. This is full of my art that I've done. Yours might be empty if you just now got the program, but how you kind of open a canvas is through here. And you have all of these default sizes that it offers you. You have like the screen size, the clipboard. I have a friend who has only exclusively used screen size until I told her what dimensions I worked on, and now she's started thinking about her dimensions more often. But when you do make a new canvas, it does give you all these extra options as well, and all of these different measurements to kind of work with. The size that I tend to work with, which is in pixels, is like 3,500, sorry, 3,000 by 3,500, which is really big, and that's why my maximum layers is 22, because the iPad does have a certain amount of storage space. So that's kind of one of the biggest downfalls of Procreate, I would say, is the fact that since you have a more limited amount of space that you can work with, you have to kind of, if you use big canvases, work with this small amount of layers. When you work at 11 by 17, as I'll show you real quick, you have a maximum of 11 layers. And so every time I draw comic pages on my iPad, I'm working with 11 layers. And that's also because I have the like smallest iPad, like in terms of storage space, just because that's what I can afford. If you get an iPad with a larger amount of storage space, then that's something that is less of a problem I have seen from other people. It also gives you kind of this false color profile thing, meaning I've never seen anything exported from Procreate with CMYK that works. So in terms of like working for print, something that you might have to do is export your Procreate file and then convert it to CMYK in Photoshop, which is something that all of you can do right now, I believe, because SCAD lets you have the Adobe Suite with your tuition. If you leave SCAD and no longer have that, then I am not completely sure how I would personally convert into CMYK, aside from just pirating Photoshop, because Adobe makes enough money. That's just my less legal suggestion, I guess. But yeah, in general, the CMYK option is kind of false, and I don't really know what all of these in particular mean. I don't tend to mess with it that much personally. There's also some time-lapse settings. This will mostly kind of affect the size of your canvas as a whole. When you work on big canvases, they take up space really quickly. So I guess if you wanted to lower the time-lapse settings, then you could do that to make your canvas a smaller size. You can also make them large if you want like a great 4K time-lapse if you are like a YouTuber or something. There's also some canvas properties, which these can be changed as soon as you could open the canvas, so this isn't really that big of a deal. But if you wanted to like have a background color that was default like gray so that you don't blind yourself every time you open a canvas, you can definitely set that up here. So that's kind of that. I will be using my default thing here, which is untitled canvas, because as you can kind of see, I hardly title anything. That's my own downfall. You guys can do that if you prefer to like have a more sense of organization here. But when I open the canvas that I usually use, which is this size, this is kind of how it looks. From the get-go, here's the brush tools. The one that I tend to use is actually a default brush that I've adjusted. So that's something I'll show you how to do kind of first off, is adjust brushes. I use this little Derwent one, but on my canvases, I'm going to make my something black. On my canvases, this looks tiny. So what I kind of did is I duplicated it and made the max size bigger so that when I draw, I can like have a bigger brush that is visible to me. And this is what I use to both sketch and line. But how you can kind of adjust your brush, if you look on, whoops, when you slide, you have these options and you can press duplicate, which I would recommend doing instead of just adjusting the brush on its own so that you can have the default one as well. When you tap it, you get all of these different options for like adjusting your brushes. I don't remember exactly my process on doing this because every time I adjust brushes, I just mess with things until it's how I want it. But you do have this little drawing pad to the side here so that if you wanted to like make the spacing 37%, you could see how this makes it a lot choppier. If you wanted to streamline, it makes your brush have this quality to it that's kind of fluid, jitter, that kind of separates your pieces here. I'm going to clear this so you can see better. Fall off, that just makes your brush fall off. I can't find better words for that aside from it just kind of disappears after a time. So if you really wanted to go and play with that, it also shows your adjustments as you move stuff around. Taper, this is like the way that your line goes down from the end here to the end here. Pressure can be how much pressure you can put down. Most of this kind of speaks for itself. But the max size, I don't remember where it is, but it is in here somewhere. Like I said, I just kind of go through here and, oh, here, maximum size. So if I wanted to have a brush that was this large for whatever reason, I definitely could do that. If I wanted to really max out that size. But you can also change the minimum size so that if you want like larger brushes for larger canvases, this is where I would recommend going, is into this properties tool. Minimum opacity is something else that you can play with, which this brush is kind of semi-transparent, so but I like it that way, and that's how I kind of keep it. So that's kind of how you can just play with the brush studio until you've got brushes that you like. And what I would kind of suggest doing with that is finding a brush somewhere in here that you generally like, and then just adjusting until you have it exactly how you want it. So that's kind of some brush tools and stuff that people may not think of messing with as much, but I was kind of determined to have a pencil-y brush because I just like that look more, and that's what I work towards. Another thing that you can do from this brush tool is you can share your brushes. And whoops, and one way that you can do this that I use the most often is actually on Discord. So if I go into here, I'm going to share it into my organization channel, and I made a channel. I'm going to share it into my organization server and like into a channel I made specifically for this. But if you can share a brush via Procreate, and you can also import brushes via Procreate. So this way to kind of import brushes as it loads for a second from Procreate is super easy, because all you have to do is tap this and it automatically will open in Procreate after you tap open in Procreate. And then you have your imported brush, which comes down into this bottom thing. And I already have this, so I'm going to delete it. But these are things that like some friends have sent me that I haven't put into other like folders yet. So yeah, does like that kind of stuff make sense so far? Does anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah. Where did you say it gets imported to? The bottom thing, the data dry, or where is it at? The imported brushes?
If you've never imported anything, I don't think it's there yet, but when you do import something, that'll appear. I can go ahead and share my like brush into the like Sequential Art Society Discord so that anybody who is like playing with this at the same time as me, you can like download this if you want to. I also have to tap with my fingers because it gets really weird when I don't. Come on, there we go. So I'll put this in presentation materials, and you can download my brush if you want it. So yeah, again, all you have to do from your iPad with Discord is tap the brush and press open in Procreate, and then it'll appear in that bottom folder that says imported. And that imported folder appears like as soon as you import a brush. So yeah, does that kind of make sense to you guys? Great. All right, so that's kind of the intricacies with that. One quick tip I do know now, which I'll also share, is I don't actually use the same eraser like brush as I do my drawing brush, because I, again, have kind of a semi-transparent one here. What I use instead is this other thing that's just a pastel brush that I downloaded. But so it has that more solid erase. But if I wanted it to match, I could hold down the eraser tool and then it changes to the same brush that I'm using. Come on. It's supposed to use a shortcut, erase with current brush. Well, I don't know how to get that to work. That's something that I don't use. I just go and manually select what eraser tool I want personally, but apparently there's supposed to be a thing where you can, there we go. Yeah, okay. So if you have your like pencil tool selected and you hold down the eraser, it'll change the eraser to the same brush you're using to pencil with. So that's kind of a cool thing if you don't want to hunt down your brushes. Like if you have a whole lot of brushes, then that'll be something that's helpful for you for sure. I'll also talk about layers here real quick. So the first thing that is kind of the most like on the nose is to create a new layer. You press the plus sign and it just creates a layer for you there. If you want to delete a layer, then you swipe to the side and you can press delete here. I'm going to go ahead and in order to show you kind of some layer styles, I'll go into a canvas that I've already worked on quite a bit so that I can show you how these kind of layers work. Actually, you know what? I'll duplicate this canvas so that I don't accidentally mess anything up as well. And also it shows you how to duplicate canvases. So in order to kind of do that, what you do is you press select first, because if you hold it down, no, that's homework. But if you hold things down, it just lets you drag them around. You can also stack canvases this way. Like if I wanted to create a stack with this cover and these thumbnails for the same class, then I would just hold it over the top of this. And when it turns blue and I release, it creates a stack. And that's kind of how you can organize how you can organize your like different projects to make all of your homework for one class go together. Like here, I've got assignment 1, which is some comic pages. Stuff like that is kind of what I use it for. But in general, I tend to not name anything and not stack anything. So my organization isn't really as key as you might see from other people. But yeah, if you want to duplicate your layer, you can press select and duplicate up here. So now I have 2 of the exact same canvas. And for the second one, I'll go in and kind of show you how these layer styles work. So as you can kind of see here, I've worked on this quite a bit. If you create a new layer, you can, I'll just go ahead and draw on this real quick. Make that drawing super pretty. And you tap here. Like what you do is you tap this little symbol that says N. It's a really small little thing to tap, but that's what Procreate makes you do for this. But when you tap this N, this is where you can find your opacity tool and you can change the layer style from all of these different things. Like I'll also make this layer a different color real quick so you can kind of see how these do affect things more than black. And there are 2 ways to go about this. So I'm going to duplicate this layer so that I can show you the 2 different ways. The first way to change your color layer, like if I wanted to make this, I like orangey red, so I'll make an orangey red layer. I could press the layer name here with my pen, where it gives you all of these different options. Like you can rename it, you can select it, you can copy, you can do all of these different things. But this is where I could select alpha lock, and then I could press fill layer, and that'll change the color of the layer for me here. Another way to go about this is to make a separate layer, change it to a clipping mask, and then fill it, and then I can just combine those 2 layers. I tend to use this alpha lock method, but one of my friends who streams as well uses this method, which I thought was worth noting in case that's something that you guys might like to, like you guys might be more comfortable doing. So I've changed this layer to red so that you can kind of see how the different things work in Photoshop or in other programs before. Some programs are a bit more limited, like I know Paint Tool Sai is missing some tools like this because that's the program I used to use. But it gives you all of these options, most of which are again available on Photoshop. The ones I tend to use the most are multiply, screen, overlay, soft light, and color. So those are the ones that matter to me the most, but you can kind of experiment with those if you want to like change the color of your drawing in a way. Like if I wanted to fill the entire canvas, which, oh, that is another tool that I should probably explain to you guys, because I keep doing these things and thinking that they're natural and then remembering that I didn't know how to do this at first. If you want to fill a shape or a layer, what you do is you take this, like you just drag this dot and drop it in. So it's like a little like paint drop tool. But you can see a lot about how these layers work if you fill an entire layer with them. But I like color because when you turn it down, it can really change the mood of your piece easily. But yeah, you can do this with shapes as well. And with a brush like this, I'll go ahead and, there we go. With a brush like this that has kind of emptier spaces, which, you know, I might find one that has more spaces in it. If you make a shape like this and you want to fill it, it's going to fill the entire canvas because there's holes in it. But one thing that you can do is when you fill your layer, you can swipe it up and down. I believe this is also something that I've never done, but oh, here. I don't know. Okay. I'm trying to teach you guys something that I don't use regularly, so I guess in the end, what I would suggest is just closing your shapes, but there is a way somehow to adjust that fill tool there. There's also a tool in Procreate called Perfect Shapes. And how you can access this is all you have to do is draw your shape and hold it down and it becomes a perfect shape that you can move around like this. You can do this with like really any kind of polygon, I can't say the word, someone got me here. Like
polygonal, I
Polygon.
think.
Polygonal?
No, just polygon.
It sounds like polygamy. Well, I mean, polygon is the shape, but if you're talking about like polygonal things, then I think it's polygonal.
Is it not polygonal?
Are you looking for a noun or an adjective?
No, like the adjective.
The adjective.
Oh, okay.
Polygonal, whatever.
Polygonal just sounds like polygamy to me, and
I know it does. Anyway, you can make any kind of shape like this. Like if I wanted to make this really crappy star because I'm really bad at freehanding stars, I totally could do that, and it looks like a really clean crappy star. So you can do this
with the pen.
Huh?
You hold down with the pen to make it look like
you just don't pick your pen up.
Oh, okay.
I can see my screen is really bright. There we go. Okay, so now you can see my hand better. I didn't realize that it was so white. Sorry about that. But like if you just hold the pen down, then it just creates a shape like this. So that's kind of how that works. And the same tool works with straight lines. Like if you hold your thing down, you get a straight line. And when you hold on, let me zoom in again so you can see my fingers. But if you make a straight line, you can kind of have an arc here, just really clean. But if I put my finger here, and then I move the pen after here, it gives you these angles that are more sharp. So if you want to have like cleaner angles like this, all you have to do is kind of like put your finger down. So if you wanted to make a right angle with the line here and then make another straight line, then I could put my finger and I will have like this right angle and stuff like that.
We do have a quick question in the chat, Erin.
Yes.
Emily wants to know, is it practical to create a comic in Procreate, or are you better off using Clip Studio?
Well, I'm better off using Procreate because I don't know how to use Clip Studio Paint. So that'll kind of be up to personal preference, I believe. I can show you kind of my comic pages real quick in here. Which like for me, this is pretty practical. Like this is something that I did make completely in Procreate. So it is a tool that you can use, but it's also something like if you know you have to space iPad, then that's something that you might want to find another program for just by the pure size of the file. But for me, I can work with it, and I have been working with it, and I've made a lot of comic pages using Procreate, and I've seen a lot of industry professionals that do use Procreate as well. So that's kind of up to personal preference, I would say.
Yeah, I know Professor Sharon does a lot of her pages in Procreate. Like once you get a system down, then I think it's just as viable an option to use Procreate as it is to use anything else.
Yeah, this is the first time my digital art has looked particularly great to me because it feels like a sketchbook to me. And that's kind of the benefit personally. Did you have a question too, Emily?
Yeah, is there I have heard, because I know in Clip there's a perspective tool. Is there a perspective tool in Procreate?
Yeah, it's hidden, and I'm going to be talking about that. So
Wonderful, thank you. Sorry to jump the gun.
no, you're good. I think that that's something that does contribute to the question and the comparison between the two. A lot of people use both is kind of my answer. So I think both are viable options personally. It just depends on your preference. And that's why next week Sarah's also doing Clip Studio Workshop, because these are kind of the two programs at the moment that comic artists tend to be looking at the most.
Yeah, I will say personally that Clip Studio has better perspective tools. I mean, Procreate's is fine and it works, but if you're doing something with complicated perspective, I would drop it into Clip Studio. But otherwise, I also use Procreate a lot, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get really into the nitty-gritty with those perspective tools, that is something you can do. For me, like I've been a traditional artist in so many of my classes, and I did that with perspective in them. Procreate's tools are functional for me. So that's just kind of, again, up to your personal preference. I don't ever get too complicated in Clip Studio at all even. So that's if you want to get really technical or not. So yeah, all up to your personal preference in the end for that. All right, so another tool is the smudge tool up here, which I didn't talk about because I don't use it. I think this is more for people who paint more often, but you can just use a bunch of different brushes, select whatever you want, and smudge your stuff. This isn't something I use at all, so I'm sorry I don't have anything clever to say about it, but there is a smudge tool in Procreate, and the nice thing about it is that you can choose literally any brush to turn into a smudge tool, similar to how you can do the same with an eraser. So yeah, that's kind of how those things work. Let me think about what I'm going to talk about next. I guess I'll kind of talk about some of these tools. So adjustment layers are a very big thing to me. What you have a bunch of options here, which you guys might have seen before and might not have. But what I'm going to do is I'll go ahead, and this is a tip I have just for using adjustment layers in general, is what I tend to do is I will export my entire layer instead of fusing all my layers together, because I might want to come back and work on different things. I'll export my layer, and then I'll just reinsert it as a new layer here on top. And then I just do adjustments with that. So for example, if I wanted to use the hue, saturation, brightness tool, which is something you guys are probably familiar with, I can play with it here. And if I decide I don't like it, I can just turn it off. So this is just kind of my tip in general with any program, is to just kind of use adjustment layers like this. But yeah, so some of the ones that are more, I guess, unique are, well, first off, it's interesting to see it in the iPad interface. So I'm going to just go ahead and show you how that looks. But somewhere with that, you have like a pencil option for everything.
We have a question in the chat again, Aaron. Hunter asks, is that so you can stay non-destructive with your layers?
In a way, that's a good way to say it, yes. Like I like to keep everything intact so that if I wanted to rework something, I could go ahead and do that. It's kind of this, it's similar to how using clipping groups keeps your layers intact instead of going in with a locked layer so much. Which I can talk about that real quick, actually, since that is a pretty relevant thing to the topic. But like clipping masks are great for this kind of thing. Like, especially if you saw last meeting, then Sarah did discuss this a little bit. If you didn't see last meeting, then I will just like briefly talk about this real quick. But if I wanted to like add, I'm trying to find, oh, here it is. If I wanted to add like some shadows or something to this hat on the bed, something that I could do is make a new layer. turn it into a clipping mask. And then what I would do is I would press multiply and do it this way. Let me just, I like to color with this brush, so that's what I'm going to do. It keeps everything within your layer here, but you can still turn it on and off. Whereas with an alpha lock layer, it would directly affect your layer. So this is kind of like a non-destructive thing in a similar way to how kind of exporting and re-importing the flattened image will keep you from having to work with your combined layers as a whole. So this is kind of just my tip on making adjustments. But like I was also saying, one thing that's unique to Procreate is it gives you a brush tool that you can like do with any kind of adjustment layer. So like here on this hue and saturation thing, I'm just using this pencil tool and scribbling over the top, and then I can play with the tools here and adjust accordingly, and it'll only affect that zone I've penciled on with the layer I have selected. So that's kind of an interesting tool that you can play with to your heart's content, really. I don't tend to use the brush tool since I don't tend to make adjustments this way, but this could be something that's really helpful for you, and it is literally available on every kind of adjustment layer. You can do it on any of this, and that's kind of a recent feature that's been added. Some things you guys might be less familiar with, gradient maps. This is something that I like to push for kind of finishing your colors because I really like how it comes out looking. Gradient maps, what they do is they turn all of your values into whatever gradient is selected on here. Most of these are just the default ones because I tend to just use, I can't remember if I adjusted this blaze one or this blaze one, but I use these two blaze ones, one of which is the one that comes with Procreate and the other of which is one that I adjusted. And how you adjust that is you just tap on it and you can kind of change the different things. And if you hold it down, you can duplicate it, which I'll do so that I don't have to ruin my gradient map that I use all the time. And you can just kind of color pick and move things around like this until your like colors kind of match up with what you want mapped onto here. Like if I wanted to make this have kind of a more purpley centric thing with lighter lights or darker lights or anything like that, I could do so with this. And I just like doing this more than a solid soft light layer, because when you turn it down, it kind of harmonizes your colors instead of having one flat color over the top. So this is something that I don't know if it's used frequently or not, because I kind of invented it to myself for myself, but maybe other people do it. If anything, now you guys have access to be able to do it. So this is kind of how I harmonize my colors at the end of the piece. This piece is obviously a work in progress, but that is something that I tend to do. Another thing that is fun for me to use all the time is the chromatic aberration tool, which has two different ways of using it. The first one, perspective, is one that kind of goes off of a central point and breaks off of that like this. So if I wanted to like make some sort of impact come from them kissing here, then I could turn this up all the way just like this, and it looks like it's a really intense Spider-Verse looking kiss. But the way I tend to actually use this is that I tend to use the displace tool, which you can drag around and displace like this. And that's because the way I tend to color and use my effects is kind of inspired by the fact that I just like how 80s and 90s anime looks, even though my style isn't inspired by anime really in much way at all. I just like the way that that kind of affects it. And I zoom in really close and I just kind of offset it a little bit, and I like the effect that it gives compared to just having it clean. So that's kind of how I use that chromatic aberration tool myself, but you can use it for a bunch of different cool effects. And again, you can use it as a pencil over here if I wanted to just do it to this guitar next to this table. I could do that and use these different tools to displace it more or less. So that's kind of how that works. Other stuff, glitch tool, that's fun. Can like literally just glitch your art like this. In Photoshop, you have to go through a whole process to get this effect, but in Procreate, they just hand it to you in all these different ways. Like, yeah, that looks great. This is how I want to finish this piece. This one's a little bit more choppy like an old TV. So you could use that for an old TV if you wanted. And then this one is real messy, but this is stuff that, again, you can play with down here in these tools as well to kind of get the exact effect you want with it. But it's just nice that Procreate offers these to you, I think. So that's something that I don't think I've seen in another program. Is like a glitch effect in Procreate like that? Sorry, in Clip Studio like that?
As far as I know, there isn't an effect like that. Clip Studio does have its fair amount of like filters and stuff, but not a ton actually. Like
Okay,
very few things like that.
That might be an advantage of Procreate then. I'm not like trying to sell one or the other. I'm just kind of showing you the things that this offers, and Sarah will likewise do the same next week. But yeah, that's kind of a glitch thing that's nice. I also like the halftone layer, but how I kind of recommend using this is by using it with a solid color or with the pencil tool, because with halftone layers, when you turn them up, they just become like dots. And so it'll kind of dotify what you've got going on. And what I tend to do is if I want to use it for a texture, I'll just make this like newspaper one kind of small, and then I'll make a clipping mask, turn it red like this, and then I just turn it down so it's a multiply or something like that, and I can get kind of a texture out of this, which is kind of simple, but it's something that's kind of nice. I also like to add noise to pieces a lot because I tend to work with a kind of a cleaner cut style, but I like when it has that texture to it. So what you can kind of do is with noise, it works the same way. You slide your pencil across the top to add noise or take it away. I don't tend to add a whole lot. I tend to add 3 to 4% noise to my own work, but this is something that is kind of up to you and what you like to prefer. The best kind of thing about playing with these different tools is just playing with them and seeing like what you prefer to look on your art, or if you have anything that you want to use. Like here's the bloom tool. So if you want to make everything look shiny, if you draw a lot of angels, you can do that. And again, if you're working on a different layer, it's nice because you can tone it down as much as you want over the top of your duplicated one. Oh, oops, didn't mean to do that. So I think most of this other stuff is stuff that most of you are familiar with, but the curves tool in Procreate is unique to me because I don't like, maybe other programs have the way to do this, but I've never figured out how to access it. So this is just kind of how I've seen Procreate do it. It lets you adjust the values of your like reds and greens and blues like separately, or you can adjust the whole like gamma like this. So if I wanted my piece to look like this, which you know is really pretty, I could totally do that. I don't even know what I did here. There we go. Yeah, that looks great. That looks finished to me. I don't know what you guys think. Sorry, I made your eyes bleed. But that's kind of how those tools work. Does anybody have any questions about like the adjustment menu or anything in it that I didn't cover that you want me to click on and show you how it works? Alrighty. So what I might show you now is kind of some of these different things. And I did make a new layer to show you some of them. It's the same two dudes again. Sorry, these are just like what I've been working on. And so you guys get to see a couple of OCs. But one thing about this canvas that you might notice is that it's in this tiny little space down here. And if I wanted to use this as my piece, then I might want to either increase the size or crop the canvas. And something about when you increase the size, which how you do that is you press this tool and you get the uniform option, which makes it stay the same. I guess I'll just go over this menu real quick. I forgot this was a menu for some reason. But when you adjust size, you have this uniform tool, which keeps everything the same size, and use by just dragging it across more. Let me zoom in so that you can see what my hands are doing across the white. Oops. So if you wanted to flip it, you could drag it across this way. although that's not how I would recommend it personally. And if you find that you've like made an adjustment, like this distort tool, I can make it really flat like this, like they're on a piece of paper or they're really long or something. If I was like, okay, that's fun, but I don't really like it, I could press this reset and it changes it back to the beginning of your transform like session. So yeah, that's a nice tool. When I do want to flip images though, I tend to just use the like image, like the flipping options that it provides for you here. It's simpler than I think figuring out how to go about it this way. But yeah, so you have all of these options. You have this distort tool, which just lets you move corners around like crazy, but it keeps them all kind of flat. And then there's a warp tool where you can like push things around accordingly, however you want in this way. And one thing that I've learned about as well with the warp tool is that you can click on the corners and you can move the corners like from front to back. And when you do that, what it kind of does is it folds it like paper like this, instead of like pushing it in how it normally would. So if you wanted it to fold like paper more, you could push the corners to the fronts or the backs. The freeform tool kind of works like the uniform one, except it doesn't keep everything the same size. So if you wanted to stretch them out like this, that looks pretty good. You could do that. And then the snapping features, these have been recently added, and I don't know how I lived without them. But if I wanted to center something in the piece, I could press the snapping tool and it gives me the Photoshop bars. And Procreate did not have this until last year. So this is something that is a really key feature, I would say. And also one thing about moving things around is you can, I'll zoom in again so you can see my hand. You can go outside of your selected area and move it around like this, or you can move it around from inside your area like this. So yeah. And then with magnetics, what you can do is it'll keep a bar from wherever you tap on your screen. I'll zoom in so you can see that again. But if I tap here and decide to move left or right, it makes a straight line that's easier to move things right to left outside of where you click. When you use the magnetics tool, I do suggest clicking outside of your selection, because when you click it inside your selection, it can get easier to make it go crazy. But anyway, kind of works with that. Do these tools make sense to everyone? Is there anything that you want me to cover that I didn't? I don't know what bilinear means, so I'm sorry, I can't explain what that is. It can also fit to screen. So this all makes sense to you guys? Great. So, but say I didn't want to transform it, because when you stretch out these lines too much, they start to lose like their quality. Let's say I just wanted to draw on a really like a much smaller canvas. How I could crop this is if I go to the like wrench. I almost called this an arrow. That's not an arrow. But if I go to the wrench and I click canvas, I can crop and resize. And that tool like works really straightforward, I would say, like this. One nice thing that it does do is it shows you how many more layers you have when you do crop it differently. Like if I had these 21 layers and made it smaller, suddenly I have 96 layers, which is really nice compared to what I usually work with. So as soon as I kind of do that, I can either press reset if I wanted to, if I decided I didn't want to do that. But if I press done, then it crops my canvas like this. So that's where the cropping tool is. So yeah, that is also really straightforward. I'm going to show you guys how to access the replays now real quick. Would you rather see the World of Warcraft thing real quick or the like clowns? Whoever answers first out loud or in the chat.
Warcraft, no clowns.
Warcraft. No. Okay. So with this piece, this is something I did for someone in December for a Secret Santa. How you can access your video tools are up here with this video. And you can either export or you can just watch games, because it's kind of a nice little thing. But how you do, if you just tap it, it'll just start playing your art as a replay like this. And this gave me a lot of complication. It was really messy, so my sketch is like that. I don't know if you can fast forward at all, which is the thing. Oh, you can. If I tap it with my finger, I can fast forward and show you guys different parts of things if I'd so desire. That's not something I knew until I literally just tapped my screen just now to see if I could. So if I wanted to fast forward or rewind, I would just use my finger to do it like you can see me doing in my webcam. Another thing you can do is you can export your time-lapse video, and it gives you the option to export the full length, which is the full length time-lapse I was showing you just now, or you can do it in 30 seconds. And the 30-second ones are interesting because they go fast if it's a bigger piece. But also on smaller sketches, sometimes your full time replay will be like 11 seconds if it's just like a sketch. So kind of work accordingly to that. As you can see, this took an extra second. I'll save it real quick and I'll just kind of show you how much that speeds things up. That's not where I want to go. There we go. So, wow, I can't see this on my iPad. So hopefully it's working for you guys, but you can see it goes quite a bit faster.
Yeah, we can see it playing on the screen.
Great, yeah. Leo said how to win 30-second replay of a Sonic drawing. Yes, gotta go fast. So you can see me draw this extremely quickly here, but it's nice because Procreate just has this kind of as a default option that you can just use whenever, and you can export it whenever. Really the downfall, I think, is that if you just have it on standard settings, sometimes the colors aren't exactly the same as when you first drew your piece because it is just a little bit lower quality so that your canvas isn't massive. But if you, again, were working and wanting to make YouTube videos, you wanted to talk over like a time lapse, that's not too hard to do. And you could just export, you could set your canvas initially to have that 4K option, draw your piece and then export your video from that. And you can use that for whatever you want your full quality in. I find that the standard is fine for me though. So does anybody have any questions about the time-lapse tool in Procreate? Luckily, that one's also pretty straightforward. Once you find it, you find it. And yeah, I guess you can prevent it from recording you as well here with this little arrow, but I've never done that because I think it's fun to be able to watch myself draw my piece really, really fast. I'm like, wow, that took me like 5 hours and I can watch it in 30 seconds. So that's kind of how that works. Another thing about Procreate is it does automatically have presets that I have turned off. But usually something that you can do is when you double tap with your finger, it'll be undo. I also have it set where when I can't draw with my fingers because I don't want to be able to. I kept accidentally making mistakes and erasing things with my fingers. So I just turned that off. But you can access all of that here in the preferences with the gesture controls. And all of this is really self-explanatory. So if you wanted to go through here and see what stuff looks handy to you and what stuff looks like it'll get in the way, you can definitely see all of this. Like for me, again, I turned off like the double tap. I turned off like the 4-finger tab, stuff like that. The touch and hold is the thing that creates your shapes and your lines. I made that delay smaller because I didn't like sitting there and waiting for an extra half second. So if you're just impatient, you can also make that delay shorter for yourself down here. All kinds of different things like this. So yeah, that's kind of how gesture controls work. I don't think I have to go that into detail because it describes everything here, luckily. Does anybody have any questions about it though? All right. I guess you can also change to a blinding interface, which I've only seen one person use in my life, but if you want to use a light interface, you can. You can change right hand and left hand interface with these tools. You can turn on a brush cursor, I think. Yeah. So that like when I'm got my brush kind of down, you can see where things are going to go. For me, that's a little distracting, but if it's something that you have been regularly using and you're used to, then that's something you can turn on. I was telling my iPad to stop. So yeah, I don't know what Project Canvas, I don't know what that means. That's not something I've used before, but that's kind of how the preferences tools work. So with the share, this is kind of how you export your files, which you guys have seen me do a couple times already, but you have all of these different options, and something that you can do is you can choose your PDF quality. So that's pretty cool. Stuff like that. I've never animated with Procreate, but you can animate with Procreate as well. And I think how that just kind of works is that your layers export as frames, which is what you do down here. Oops. Has anybody exported as an animation before in Procreate? Can you confirm or deny?
Yeah, it pretty much so when it comes to animation and Procreate, it's just every layer is its own frame.
Like, if I wanted to just make a GIF of this for some reason, I could export this as a GIF, and I think it would just move that.
Yeah, if you go into the wrench, there's an animation assist, and it will actually do it'll like make, yeah.
Wow. Yes. So that's great to know. Again, I've never animated with Procreate before because it's not something I'm drawn to, but Link has dropped us a hot tip here today. So if you do want to animate like using Procreate, this is something you can use for that. And I guess if I exported as animated GIF, it would show me this, which is pretty. So yeah, nice. Make it go really fast. So you can do max resolution or web ready, I guess, and make your background transparent if you want. Stuff like that. So that's kind of how you can use this if you, because I know that there are a couple of people. Purge my video. Yeah. Wait, what am I? Okay. So if you are an animator, which I know there are a couple of people who are animation majors in here, then you can kind of use that, I suppose. Like I've seen in chat that it's like, it's great for GIFs, but not great for really anything else. That's kind of what I would expect as well. It's a really like simple feature, but if you wanted to make like, if you're a painter or something and you wanted to go that extra mile and make your drawing blink, then you definitely could just go through and add some frames and make your drawing blink. So yeah, now that we're like an hour in, does anybody like have any questions? Need to take a breather to process anything like that?
Did you already show how to rename canvases?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay, yeah.
How you can do that is you can either like, I don't know if you can, no. Okay. If you tap on the like layer name here, you can press rename. And then if you use your Apple Pencil, sometimes it'll make you try to write it out. So if you use your fingers for this, then you can use your keyboard. So if I wanted to name my layer, then I could do that like that. Again, I don't like name anything. So it's good that you brought that up because that's not something I would have ever thought about. But yeah, you just tap the name of your layer where it says layer 4, and you're able to press rename within all the other options.
I actually meant the whole like piece, but that is extremely useful too.
Oh, the canvas.
Like go to gallery. Yeah.
Yeah. If you tap on them, like it's a small little place, but if you tap on the where it says untitled artwork, then you can rename your canvas here. And so I'm going to name that one like this like this. Yeah. So I don't name anything, but if you do name things and you're more organized than I am, that's a way you can do so.
I don't name most of my artworks, but I name my layers. For not naming your layers, you're a chaos demon.
I mean, most of the time I can only have like 20 max, so I don't get that lost.
Fair. I don't know. I also am just distractible, so I name all mine.
Mm-hmm. So which one of these was the one that I was working on? I'm going to delete one of these. I think it was this one. So I'm going to delete that real quick. So before I get into the perspective tools, does anybody have any other questions of things that you think should, okay, sorry, it froze for a second. Is there anything that you think I should have covered by this point that I have not yet, or that you've seen me do and not like explain? because I might have done stuff automatically and not realized.
I was wondering, I don't know if you will get into this, but can you have two canvases in at the same time, like different? Like sometimes I like to have like photo reference on a different canvas. Can you have that in Procreate or no?
I think that there's a way for your iPad to do that, like by dragging your apps to different screens. Does anybody know?
There's a thing that
Like
you can
here.
do. You can
So yeah, here you go.
toggle reference.
So you can do things like this with an iPad with like any of your apps, where you just swipe up a little bit with your finger down here. And it
There's
brings up
also
this little menu,
reference
except if
feature.
you swipe too hard, it closes your tab. But you can open two canvases side, you can open two like apps side by side like this.
Oh my
Oops.
god, thank you.
So that's like one way you can do it. It just crashed. Okay, I need to get rid of this. Something that's cool about this though is that you can drag and drop things a lot. So if you wanted to add a layer out of a photo, you could import it by just dragging it in like this. This is how I finished this drawing. So
In the
that's
chat,
if I wanted.
in the chat, Isabella says there's a reference button in the settings under Canvas.
Okay, let me, how do I close this? Sorry, this isn't a feature I use.
Did you try pulling all the way to the side?
I didn't.
Cool.
Nice, thank
There
you.
you go.
A reference in the settings under Canvas. Yes, there you go. So yeah, I guess you can import images and stuff into here. What I tend to do is I just tend to have my reference up on my computer or on my phone as if I'm drawing traditionally. So that's why it's not something I think of much. But if you like it directly by your canvas, that makes total sense. This is a way that you can kind of do that, and you can drag it around and it stays there while you're working. So yeah, that's not a tool that I use, but that is a tool that I have a lot of friends who do use. And there's also separate apps that can help you save your like storage space that you can use at the same time with Procreate. I don't remember what the one that my friend uses is, but I can ask them after the meeting and I can drop that into Discord. Are there any other questions about things that I might have swiped past that you might want me to actually talk about?
Okay, you already showed this, but I was kind of momentarily distracted. Did you show the snap feature?
Yes.
Because I haven't used that yet.
The snap feature is just like the Photoshop button, like Photoshop things, where when you drag things around, it tells you when it's centered. I think that's pretty much most of what it does. So
Cool,
that's
thank
kind of
you.
how that works. Yeah, very simple. So I can understand how you might have missed it since it took like 2 seconds. Easy to miss. Anybody else before I move into like the perspective tools? Okie dokie, Smokey. I'm gonna go into my empty canvas over here with all of the beautiful titles. I'll show you how to select multiple layers real quick because I don't think I did that yet. When you want to select multiple layers, you can see my hand like fine right here. Yeah, okay. So when you slide to the right like this, that's how you select multiple layers. And when you do select multiple layers like this, you can delete them all at once, or you can turn them into a group like this. One thing that I do like about having groups is that if you wanted to move things around, you can do so individually with your different layers within the group. But if you select the group as a whole, you can flip it like your canvas, or you can distort the entirety of all of these layers at the same time.
I love, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I love groups for pages. Like I'll have like my thumbnail and then my pencil and my ink and my colors. I think groups are extremely helpful specifically for comic pages to do that so that you're a little bit more organized or whatever.
Yeah. I like them because, yeah, like I like them because I flip my canvas a lot. So a lot of the time I'll have all of these combined layers Like this has everything that's visible right now. So if I wanted to check my layer, I could flip the entire thing because it's all in a group together. So I mostly use them for canvas flipping and stuff like that, editing a bunch of things at the same time. But they're helpful for an abundance of reasons. And I didn't know how to make groups for a very long time with Procreate, but that's how you do it. And I think you can also make subgroups. Yep. So if you were drawing like a whole body and you wanted that person's whole body into like one group, but you wanted their head in a subgroup, you could do that.
You can also just
But I'm gonna
hold a
delete all of
layer on
those.
top of another layer.
Like if I, here we go. Kind of like how you're combining canvases.
Yeah. If
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's good for if you like, hello. If you wanted to move a layer into a group, you could do it like that. That is how you move layers on top of each other, though. You just slide them with your finger like this, or with your pen, I think. But it's harder for me to do it with my pen personally, so I tend to use my fingers. So does anybody have any questions about groups or anything like that? I realize now I didn't talk about this background color layer, but this works kind of the same as Photoshop's default background layer, and you can change the background like this by just tapping on it anywhere. But you could also turn it off if you want to have a transparent piece. I don't tend to like using it because I like to have my background incorporated with my colors. So I tend to just make a layer over the top of that. And I consider this my background layer so that I can just combine everything at the end and mess with it, because you can't fuse the background layer with your other layers. As you can see, I'm trying to pinch this. It doesn't work. So the background layer is like its own separate thing. So it's kind of just up to you how you want to use that or not. But yeah, I'm gonna make this gray again because I prefer not having my eyes blinded. So I will talk about the perspective tools now. These are hidden, but they are hidden under drawing guide. And when you first see drawing guide, what it automatically gives you is this like grid. When you draw on this, it doesn't do anything besides just show you a grid. One way you can actually make your layer lock to it, kind of how it does in Clip, as I understand, is if you tap your layer, now you have this drawing assist option added, which was not there before you turned on the drawing assist as a whole. So you do have to turn on the guide before you can turn this on, but when you press drawing assist, now, well, sorry, that was my brush. Now when you draw off lines, they'll be straight up and down because that's the way that this drawing guide works. So this is the default grid one. And when you go into edit drawing guide, the first thing that you can do is you can change the color of your drawing guide to like anything that you want, so that maybe it won't be as distracting as whatever color you're lining with. You can also turn the opacity up and down. Sorry, I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. My throat is, I've been talking a lot. All right, so you can change the color and you can change the opacity of your drawing guide if you so desire. If I wanted it to be pink, I could do that and make it a little bit darker. I can also change the thickness so that maybe if you use a thicker brush, it might help you more to see it thicker than that. You can also make the grid smaller or larger. And you can, I believe, yes, if you like click this little blue button, you can move it around, or you can rotate it. Now all of your stuff will be locked either this way or this way. So that's kind of how that default one works. Does anybody have any questions about this first one?
Where is this under again? You said it's under drawing assist?
Yeah. So what you do is you tap the wrench, you go to canvas, and then drawing guide, and you turn it on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
No problem. And then when you press edit drawing guide, that's how you find the menu. So that's how that first one is. I keep accidentally making it white, but so if I made a new layer that was assisted now, it would be locked to go this horizontal direction since I've rotated it. So now I'm going to show you the isometric guide. So isometric perspective is something that you work in with environments, props, and structures, because that's something that Low tends to have you do for your vehicle drawings, your gun drawings, things like that. It's kind of an easy way to have perspective incorporated into your objects. So when you turn on this isometric guide, it will work pretty functionally the same as that last one did, but it'll just be an isometric perspective like that. So I made a new layer, turn it on to Drawing Assist, and now everything will kind of follow with these lines. Everything will be parallel. That's how isometric perspective works, is like things are just parallel to each other like this, all of your lines. If you saw my perspective meeting, you saw me draw a cute little tiny town with this. It's very great for tiny towns. So great for Low's class and great for tiny towns. And that's kind of how the isometric guide works. Does anybody have any questions about this one? I know it's also kind of straightforward, but if you want anything clarified, let me know. Oh, I guess one thing I haven't mentioned that I've been doing this whole time is how you move around the canvas with your fingers. So if you want to look at my camera real quick, you just use 2 fingers to move around. You can't use 1 finger to move around because that's kind of how you tap tools. So you have to use like 2 at all times. And you can pinch and zoom like this, like you would on a smartphone. So that's how you move around Procreate. It's something that feels really automatic to me, so it's not something I thought to mention, but that is something that is worth mentioning. So now I will go into the perspective guide. This can go from 1 to 3 points. And how you set that up is you press the drawing guide and you tap. And now you have a vanishing point. And that's really all it is for this. I'm going to make it black, or no, I'll make it like red. Yeah. So when you create your vanishing point, it gives you all of these lines yet again. And then when I go and turn on my Drawing Assist, everything I draw will either be horizontal, up and down, side by side, or going to the vanishing point. So if you wanted to make a setting that was 1 point perspective to here, you'd be able to easily draw your little box in perspective. I'm going to zoom in so I can do this actually easier. As you can see. So you can go and kind of use that tool. Again, it's a lot simpler than the Clip Studio ones, but this is something that works for me because in Clip Studio, I was using it to just draw boxes because I was like, oh God, this is so much, I'm so confused. So if you prefer simpler interfaces, I do because I'm stupid. You might just because you just prefer them. But this is kind of a good thing for that. So that's how it works with 1 point. If I wanted to turn this into a 2 point perspective guide, all I would have to do is tap somewhere else, and now there's 2 points. And as I move these around, you can just kind of drag them by themselves, and you can move them off the canvas as well, and it shows them this way. I'm going to make this color that you can see, like dark blue. So now I have these 2 points that go off of the canvas, and you can see how far they go off the canvas easily because of this filled in zone over here. So now when I draw on an assisted layer, I can draw my boxes in 2 point perspective. That's pretty nifty. That line was a little bit weird, but you can also turn your layer drawing assists on and off so that if you don't want to use the perspective guide, you can just turn it off real quick. If you wanted to like erase easier, because when you do have it turned on, it also erases in perspective. Which you might not prefer, but you can turn it on and off and kind of use accordingly. And if you just wanted to draw boxes like this and then make another layer and draw something inside like a toaster, then I would easily be able to just kind of see where everything ends up in here. And then there's a nice little toaster for you guys right there in perspective. Very fun. So does anybody have any questions up until 2 point here? All right, if you want to add a 3rd point, which you can only go up to 3 points. So don't count on having 6 to 12 points or whatever if you want to work that crazy. You just tap again on the, there we go, on your horizon line, and it adds a third point for you. And when you add a third point, you know that you usually want it to be really far off the page. You can zoom out and just make it as far off like as you possibly can this way. Just like that. And now you'll have the subtlest of 3-point perspective. And this will help you work with like drawing usually buildings and stuff like this. Oops, I forgot to make my drawing assist. There we go. So now everything, instead of going straight up and down, will be going to that third point in perspective, and then to your 2 points on the sides here. So does this make sense to everyone with the perspective tools up until this point? Does anybody have any questions pertaining to what I've shown you so far? Sorry, I'm cracking my hands. Alrighty. The last perspective tool we have is symmetry, which is very easy to explain. You can move this right or left. You can turn it around on any end you want. What this does is it makes whatever you draw symmetrical on either side. I accidentally made the line white again. This is a problem for me, as you can see. I'll make it red. Come on. There we go. White is right next to done, so I keep accidentally tapping that. But where are you? Here we go. Okay. So if I made another assisted layer now. Wow. So anything I draw on this side will also be drawn on the other side now. As you can see, it's an easy little canvas flip here. When this tool was first added, a lot of people were drawing like mandalas and stuff. So that's cool. With the auto shape tool. Nice to have that symmetry sometimes. I drew a heart the other day for a canvas and was like, I am not doing a good job at drawing this heart very well, so I used the perspective tool just to draw that. It's something that can help make your life a little bit easier. So yeah, that's just kind of how that one works. Also, if you change your different assisted layer, like if you change your drawing guide and I suddenly change this to isometric, your layer that you've been using that on will will change accordingly. So you don't have to make a new layer every time. I've just been doing that so I can turn them off. Something else you can do is when you turn the drawing guide off, but you leave your layer assisted, it'll still work in isometric perspective without a drawing guide on, if that's the last thing that you had it set to. Does anybody have any questions about this stuff? Oh, and when you export your canvas, if you don't turn off your drawing layer, it won't show up in your export. So don't worry about that. We all like dandy and cool with the drawing guides. That's great. I'm just speaking of silence. So yeah, that's kind of how all of that action works. Trying to think of stuff I have not yet covered. I had a couple notes on my phone that I'm going to check and see if I'd covered everything there. Oh, right. Okay. So I'm going to talk about some, like how to have the threshold adjust when you're selecting things. It's taking everything in me not to pick up my iPad because I usually draw with my iPad in my hands. But if I were to draw this shape with my layer that is not completely it's semi-transparent. If I wanted to do this and I wanted to select it after that, this is the selection tool. I press automatic. And if I hold it down when I select it, I can make the threshold bigger or smaller by dragging it left and right. So if I wanted it to select just kind of this inner part, I could do that. But if I wanted it to select as much as I could for my line, I could bring up the threshold until it breaks out and then just go a little bit farther back. And then now that stuff is selected accordingly like this. So that's something that's been hidden to me and something that I discovered when I was trying to color someone's art that was not prepped to color very easily. So that's kind of how you can select that. Like if I wanted to select my line art here. Oh, I need to select the layer. Sorry. I'm going to fuse all of this. There we go. So if I made that threshold bigger, now everything that it's connected will start selecting as well. So that's kind of how you can like swipe up and down with this threshold tool. Does anybody have any questions about this? All right. Since I realize now that I didn't cover the selection tools, freehand is something that's like a lasso where you can like add more and more like this. You can also remove by like changing the setting from add to remove. And if you draw like some stuff you have selected, it'll deselect it. If you press invert, it inverts your selection. And now I have everything outside of here selected instead of this inner part. And if you press copy and paste, you can kind of, okay, yeah, we're selected. If you press copy and paste, it turns it into a new layer when you copy and paste. So if I move this over here now, I have two of the same intersected little mischievous smiley faces. And the color fill layer is something that I really like as well, which is if you drew a shape and you wanted to fill it in, you press color fill, and then every shape you draw will be full of that color. This is a way that helps you flat really easily. Because the way I color is I tend to use this brush and I'll like go around my piece with the outside like this, and then fill in the middle by just tracing my outline and filling it in like this so that my edges aren't hard, but it is still like a solid block of color in the middle. So the color fill tool, very useful. It's also useful if you want to draw shapes. Like you can make the rectangle selection tool and automatically color fill it like this. Same for the ellipse one. And yeah, but if you turn it off, you can just do it like this. You can see things easier, I suppose. Does anybody have any questions about the selection tool function?
Not a question, but my favorite feature is the copy and paste. It's so useful.
It sure is.
Like if you're doing a building, you can do that, you know, with windows or something. I mean, you might have to adjust the perspective, I guess, but I don't know. I think it's supremely useful.
Yeah, it's also really nice if you wanted to make your like if you wanted to make sections of your lines bolder. Like if I drew a person down here, whoop, I want to use Derwent. If I drew a person down here and I kind of did them really light, this is my little guy down here, and I had some lines that were a little bit light, I could choose to duplicate the whole thing and it darkens my lines as much as I want. Or I could choose to go in and I'm like, okay, I just want his facial features to be darker. Then I can go in and select this and copy and paste it. And then now his facial features will have the darker lines and stuff like that. So this is good for kind of adjusting that opacity for your line art. And then if you just fuse the layers, it'll make it darker like that. So that's kind of another function that I've used it for. But copy and paste is a really helpful tool. It's so much faster. And the tools like that for the traditional copy and paste, you can find by like going in and selecting what you want. And let's say I wanted to move his eyebrows. Sorry, my throat is, I've been talking. But if I wanted to put his eyebrows on a new layer, I could go in, I could carefully select them with this lasso tool. I press the wrench, cut, paste. Now they're on a new layer. And you could also do that with the copy and paste thing and then just go back and erase them. But I tend to find this to be more useful in most circumstances. And then now I can move his little eyebrows around with no trouble. So does anybody have any more questions that they want talked about in more depth? Alrighty. Is there anything? I'm trying to think of anything else that I might not have mentioned as of yet. And I don't know if there's anything else particularly that I can cover. Oh, here's another thing that I just learned today. So if you wanted to move something and you only wanted it to move a little bit, you can tap here to nudge it. Like if you just tap outside of your little box. So if you don't want to move it like a lot like this, you can just tap and it'll move towards your pen, wherever you're tapping. So that's good for little small changes. Other than that, though, I am not completely sure if there's anything I have not covered yet. Is there? Oh, if you want to select a color, which is something that I realized I haven't done because it feels automatic, all you have to do is hold your finger down and then you can select any color that it passes over like this. So if I wanted to use this background gray color again, I could just hold it down my pencil and find it like that. But if I wanted to go back to black and I couldn't refine it for some reason, I can go up here and can you see my finger? It's kind of dark.
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, but if you hold down like here, it goes to your previous color. So you can flip back and forth like this by just holding it down with your finger over and over.
In the chat, Lauren is asking about blurred effects.
Oh, yes. Those are tools that Procreate does have as well. I'm going to go to a finished piece again. I'll duplicate this clown one just because it's here. So let's say I wanted to make Juggle Buddies blurry. Maybe since this does have some motion blur on it, this is a relevant one in a way. There's different types of blur that are offered with Procreate. And all right, so this layer is, let me duplicate it. Yeah. The one that you guys might be most familiar with, just a general blur, would be like the Gaussian blur here, which you can turn that up and down and it'll give you your like artistic Gaussian blur. But that's something I found to be helpful. Like if you wanted to push your, if you wanted Choppy here, which is the clown in the front, if you wanted her to be more visible than Kadinsky, which is the background one, then you could go in and use your select tool. Sorry, I started selecting wrong. You could go in and use your select tool and kind of go around here like this. Select Kadinsky. And then you can use your effect in your selected layer and only that. So now like only he's blurry and she's kind of brought to the front here. So that's kind of how you can use selective blur. Gaussian blur is good for bringing stuff forward and pushing things back. And then there's a nice motion blur tool in Procreate, which gives you this effect. And how this works is it's in any direction you swipe, it'll make the motion go that way. So if I wanted it to go this way, then I would swipe diagonally. If I wanted them to go right and left, I could swipe right and left and it would do that. Similar with up and down like this. And you can add as much or as little as you want just by dragging your pen back and forth. Like if you just wanted a little bit of motion blur like this, you could do that. So that was really useful for me in this piece already because I made the like pins that they're juggling together. A little bit of motion blurriness with those. There's also perspective blur. Not something I use much, but you can use it if you wanted to make like a Mr. Krabs meme or something of the sort. Something that's kind of focused on one point and brought out like this. Or you can choose a direction and make it blurred only in that one direction like this. So this can be pretty useful or not useful at all, depending on just like what you're working on. I think that is, yeah, that's all of the blur tones, the blur options that it does have. Is that helpful? I think you can also use that. You can definitely actually use that as a pencil tool as well. So if you only wanted some things to be blurred, like if I blurred out Choppy's face, I could just use the pen tool to blur out her face like this. And then with my finger, I can turn it up and down Great.
In the chat, Lauren says, that is perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. One little gesture thing that I think is useful for me personally as well is if you're zooming around and you're like a little bit crooked because you're working on something and you want it to just be like a normal canvas again, if you just pinch really fast, it snaps your canvas back like to in place. Does anybody else have any questions about stuff I haven't covered that you like? Maybe tools that you've used in other programs that you want to ask if they're in Procreate, or if there's just anything that you've seen me brush by or do and not explain. You got nothing?
Sounds like you've covered everything people wanted you to talk about.
I mean, that's great.
I have a quick thing. I just went and looked, and if you go to the wrench, there is a help section. If if later on you have a question and you want to see if you can find it. There's a handbook online. There's a thing called Learn to Procreate. It takes you to YouTube.
Yeah. There's all kinds of
built-in
tutorials.
tutorials. Yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of tutorials that cover a ton of stuff. Like, you can kind of see my art style just based on the stuff I've shown here today. Like, I don't tend to work with crazy painterly things as much as some other artists do. So if you wanted to learn to paint and stuff like that, I would absolutely seek out tutorials for that kind of thing. I actually have a friend who is great at recommending painting tutorials. So if you ever want me to, like, I can drop those in Discord, or I can, if you just want to reach out to me, I can hand them to you. But that's not something that I am as proficient in. But it's super easy to seek out different tutorials for different programs for different styles of art. And what you would just do is go to YouTube, look up the tutorial for whatever you want to find, and then find someone with an art style that you either want to emulate or that is similar to yours that you would like to like kind of keep using. So because they'll likely be using features and tools and teaching you how to use those features and tools that that you want to know, compared to stuff that might not be as useful to you. And again, as you can see on here, you can see the chromatic aberration and noise that I add to everything. But I like the subtle touch it gives. Does anybody else have any questions or anything that I glossed over?
Not a question, but you can just, as a quick aside, you can download free brushes online for Procreate.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess be careful and use a trustable website so you don't get a virus or have virus blocking stuff. But I haven't had any problems with that, and I've downloaded some great brushes, especially like I have a star brush that does, like stars in a night sky, and it's so much easier than going dot 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 dot.
Yeah. I actually, these True Grit ones here were free. The Daub ones and the Comics Max Pack stuff I did pay for, and then these All-Star ones are ones that Procreate themselves offered for free, like either in December or January. So you really can seek out like a lot of free brushes, and you can go through and pay for things like these Comics Pack ones. I've found to be pretty useful. I don't regularly use them as much because most of the time when I'm just sketching or doodling and most of my comic page work, I just use these, like I use the Derwent one that I adjusted. But yeah, these True Grit ones, super helpful, I would say, because it gives you these like nice little like halftone things that you can use over the top of your art if you want to just get that extra texture. You can layer them on top of each other. Looks really nice. And then you can get these like speckle brushes, which you could use for freckles if you wanted to. Or you could just use them for, again, more texture, something. There's some sprinkles here. That's fun. All kinds of good stuff. And those True Grit ones are also just great, again, because that's their sample pack, and their sample pack is excellent. So yeah, your brushes probably, they don't usually make or break your art. but I found that they are something that can really benefit you. So that's not something to fixate on as much as it is something that you can use as a tool. Anyone else have any questions? This pretty good and covered. All right, so I guess I can do my fun little YouTube outro since I'll go ahead and end the recording here. So if you are, let me find the end tool. All right, if you're watching back from YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the video, guys. This is a unlisted video, so you had to find a link to get here, but sure, go ahead and do all of that. It's not going to hurt anything. Thank you and goodbye. Next week, we'll have Sarah talking about Clip Studio basics. So tune in and stay cool.